So part 2 with the Pokemon Scarlet and Violet DLC, the Indigo Disk, is just around the corner, and this is definitely a very interesting type of DLC that Pokemon has done, as compared to the DLC that came out for Pokemon Sword and Shield with the Isle of Armor and the Crown Tundra. This DLC is actually going to be a continuation of the previous DLC that happened with Scarlet and Violet, being the Teal Mask. And so because of this, there's going to be some returning characters in this DLC like Briar and Carmine, but there's also going to be so many possibilities that are going to be open now, as this is going to be a continuation from the Teal Mask, and one of them is actually something that Game Freak has never really done before with a main series Pokemon game that I would love to see, and that's what I'm going to talk about with you guys in this video, and that is making Kieran into the first ever tragic villain. And so before we start talking about it, there is of course going to be spoilers for the Pokemon Scarlet and Violet Teal Mask DLC inside of this video, so if you haven't played it yet or you haven't finished it yet, then definitely click off this video and play through everything first before coming back and really kind of learning about everything that happens in there, or if you don't care about the story, then you can definitely keep on watching. Alright, but now that that's out of the way, let's actually talk about the character Kieran, as if you play through the Teal Mask DLC all the way, then you know at the very end of the DLC, you can see Kieran kind of tying up his hair, and he's basically saying, I need to get stronger, a lot stronger, and then he says, just you wait, as the game ends, and it says to be continued. And of course, this is implying that Kieran is going to be returning in the Indigo Disk DLC, but it's really how they decide to go about it, which could make Kieran into one of the most unique characters that we've ever seen in a mainline Pokemon game. See, at the end of this Teal Mask DLC, Kieran does kind of give this smug smile here, as if he's planning something evil, and I really feel like if they decide to fully commit with this and make Kieran into a villain character, this would be one of the best types of villains that Pokemon has ever done, and it's really a type of villain that we've never seen before, being a tragic villain. See, we've had a lot of villains within the mainline Pokemon games, some of course better than others, but they've always been pre-assigned characters that have already been set inside of the game with their own intentions and motivations, and they're basically just roadblocks for you that you have to overcome, and you have to beat them and stop their plans and everything in order to overtake them and be able to progress your journey. This would be the first time that we would actually see a good character turn into a main villain, and that is something that we've never really seen before in a mainline Pokemon game, as we've had a lot of different types of villains, but they've always kind of just been villains that have already been pre-assigned from the very beginning of the game. And of course, we've had simple villains like Giovanni, who simply just wants to use Pokemon as tools of business in order to make a profit and be able to make a lot of money. We've had goofy villains like Archie and Maxie, who just want to use Groudon and Kyogre's powers to dry up or flood the entire world. Crazy villains like Cyrus, who wants to use the powers of the god of space and the god of time in order to create his own universe. Manipulative villains like Getsus, who is basically brainwashing an entire civilization by spreading lies and all these things about liberating Pokemon in order to gain power. Psychotic villains like Lucamine, who's sacrificing and killing Pokemon to open up ultra wormholes and bring Pokemon from other dimensions. And awful villains like Chairman Rose, who randomly just wanted to bring back a devastating Pokemon for the sake of Galar's future with Energy Crisis or something. I don't know, I couldn't tell you. This villain was just garbage and really made no sense in my opinion. But the point is, all of these villains have already been characters that have existed from the very start of the game, and they've already had their own motivations and their intentions. If they fully commit to making Kieran into a villain, Kieran would be one of the very first Pokemon villains who would actually be a character who was never supposed to be evil or a bad person at all, but just became evil due to all of the stuff that he's experienced. And just having a character like this that has gone through a tragedy in order to become the villain that they are has got to be one of my favorite types of villains ever in fiction. Like, of course, you can also just have villains who are evil for the sake of being evil, like Ganondorf or Giovanni or somebody like that, who are just evil characters with their evil intentions. But when you have a character that you've actually seen transform into a villain but were initially good, you can actually really sympathize with them and really kind of understand why they did what they did and why they became a villain because of all the stuff that they've gone through. And there are so many examples throughout fiction of amazing villains like this that have gone through this transformation right before your eyes. And of course, the one that comes to my mind is the tragedy of Anakin Skywalker, where Anakin was never supposed to be a bad guy, but just an amazing Jedi for the Jedi Council, but unfortunately he was manipulated into then becoming Darth Vader and a leader on the dark side. Sephiroth from Final Fantasy was always supposed to just be an amazing soldier for Shinra, but was traumatized from an event that he had through a mission in Nibelheim, and when you really see something like this and see how the character changes into the villain that they become, I always do think that it's a very special type of villain. And so let's take a look at this in Kieran's case, where Kieran has always kind of just been a very shy and reserved person. It's very easy to see this from the very first time that you meet him. He only kind of gets along with his sister Carmine to an extent and his grandpa, but he loves this ogre Pokemon that is said to be kind of like this legend inside of this village, but the entire village hates this Pokemon. And maybe he likes this ogre Pokemon because he sees himself in it, where the ogre Pokemon is also kind of just alone roaming the mountains and doesn't really have anybody to really kind of be its friend, and maybe Kieran kind of sees himself in that, where he's kind of just alone by himself too. And then you show up inside of this DLC, and even the very first time that you meet Kieran, his sister Carmine kind of has to do all the talking for you, where she says like, oh, I think Kieran actually would really like to battle you, so how about you go ahead and battle with him as well? Like, he doesn't actually ask you himself. And as the Teal Mask progresses, you and Kieran get paired up to do the school assignment, where you have to go around Kitakami and take different pictures of the different landmarks that showcase the legend of what exactly happened with the ogre Pokemon and the Loyal 3. Now, even when you and Kieran become partners, he's always just like, I think I'm probably just going to be a nuisance to you, so I'm just going to tag behind you, and I'll just wait for you to get there first, and then I'll follow you later. So he doesn't even really travel with you or really come with you, because he's really just kind of shy and reserved around you. But the really cool thing here is that Kieran is actually starting to open up a little bit as you get to learn more about him and you get to talk more with him, and we can even see this through the different pictures that you take with him at the different landmarks, where the very first one that you can see here, the very first picture that you take, he's kind of still very shy and he's kind of just a little bit alone, but the second picture that you take with him, he's actually smiling a little bit, he's opened up a little bit, and he's kind of getting a little bit closer with you. And for Kieran, this is of course amazing because you are like his first real friend outside of his family with Carmine and his grandpa, who actually likes to talk with him and actually likes to battle with him and everything. And it's cool to see somebody like that for the first time in Kieran's perspective, as he's always kind of just been like this shy person and nobody's really ever talked to him. Eventually though, in the DLC, you and Carmine get to actually see the ogre Pokemon for the very first time, and Kieran isn't there. Of course, Kieran, being so obsessed with this Pokemon, would have loved to see the ogre Pokemon for himself for the first time as well, but he isn't there, and you actually get to learn the truth about this ogre Pokemon from Kieran and Carmine's grandpa, who really tells you about how the ogre Pokemon was actually a victim from the Loyal 3 and was never really a bad Pokemon to begin with. And during all of this, the grandpa tells you to please not tell Kieran about the truth of this entire story with the ogre Pokemon, and you and Carmine basically are the only ones there, but Kieran's actually been in the background eavesdropping and hearing this entire conversation. And of course, after hearing this now, Kieran needs to verify if you're really his friend, and so the next time you talk to him, he just straight up confronts you and asks like, hey, what were you and my sister talking about back there? And both of the options that the game gives you for how to respond are lying to him, so you're forced to lie to him and tell him that you weren't really doing anything and it's not really that important. And of course, it's after that where you turn around and go away, where Kieran is like, why? Why did you lie to me? Because at this point now, you've kind of broken the trust that you've had with Kieran, and it's really kind of shattered a lot of stuff for him, because this was the first person that he was thinking was actually like his real first true friend. And now that you've lied to him, it really kind of hurts him. And to make matters worse, when you finally get to see Ogerpon, she decides that she wants to be caught by you and travel alongside with you on your journey, even though Kieran has been obsessed with this ogre Pokemon for his entire life and has always wanted to capture it and become friends with it, and now even Ogerpon doesn't want Kieran. And so at this point, Kieran is basically devastated. The two most important things that were a part of his life are now both snatched away from him. The first one being you as the first actual real friend that he was actually going to have, where he was starting to open up with you, he was starting to really talk with you, he was starting to smile in the images and everything, but then you lied to him and broke that trust. And then of course Ogerpon, who's been the Pokemon that Kieran has been obsessed with for his entire life, always wanting to see this Pokemon, and then you come along here and take that Pokemon away from him as well. And so after all of this now, Kieran pretty much just hates you and wants to basically do whatever he can to destroy you, and that's why now he wants to become as strong as he can, which is why I really feel like if they decide to commit to this all the way and make Kieran like the main villain of the Indigo Disk DLC, this would be one of the most unique villains that Pokemon has ever done, because Kieran wasn't a character who had evil motivations or intentions from the beginning. He was like this shy, timid, reserved character, and you could actually see him go through this entire transformation where he began to have a little bit of hope in this ogre Pokemon. He began to have a little bit of hope in you, and then you came in there and snatched all of that stuff away from him, and then eventually transformed him into this insane villain. Now it's actually already looking like Kieran is going to be the champion of the Blueberry Academy within the Indigo Disk DLC, as they've already revealed the Elite Four trainers to us, but they haven't shown us the champion, except kind of just a little glimpse of them in the trailer, where you can kind of see what clothing that they're wearing. But if we do take a look closely, when they do show us the champion, we can see that the champion is wearing red gloves, a yellow belt, and an academy uniform, just like how Kieran was, which is probably very likely that Kieran is going to end up becoming the champion, which would be the most powerful trainer within the Blueberry Academy, just like how we wanted. Now, I really hope that they don't make him just be like the champion and that's pretty much his entire purpose within the Indigo Disk DLC. I really want him to fully commit into trying to destroy you and want you to become a powerful villain as well, because I feel like that would be such an insane character arc to kind of go through, where you can really kind of just see like how this timid, shy guy from the beginning that you met inside of the Teal Mask ends up becoming like this insane villain now at the very end of the Indigo Disk. And so I think it would be amazing now if maybe Kieran becomes obsessed with a new legendary Pokemon, or maybe now he becomes obsessed with his Terrapagos Pokemon and he's really helping out Briar with the research and everything in order to get this Terrapagos Pokemon so that maybe he can use it on his team against you, and now he has this really strong Pokemon, and maybe now he can even transform it into like that really crazy disc thing that we see inside of the Pokemon Scarlet and Violet book, and this is going to be like the real threat to the world and everything, and this is where you have to have like this big finale showdown against Kieran to stop him from doing all of this. I feel like it would just make so much sense for his character, because even in like the official artwork for the Indigo Disk, we can see here that Kieran pretty much has his back turned to us and we can't see his face, kind of like what they do with the villains on movie posters, where I guess this isn't the best example, but we can kind of see here that Thanos has his back turned in the background because he is of course the main villain inside of Infinity War. And so personally, I'm really hoping that Kieran is in fact going to be like the main villain that's going to be inside of the Indigo Disk. I really don't want it to end up being Briar or Cyrano, because I feel like if Briar was actually like this teacher who ended up being evil for something, it would just be really dumb, because she really just kind of seems like somebody who is interested in learning about this Terrapagos Pokemon and the Scarlet and Violet book. And then if this character Cyrano, who's like the director, turns out to be scheming something evil behind the scenes for the Blueberry Academy, I wouldn't really like that either. I really think that if they decide to make Kieran into the main villain, this would be one of the most unique villains that Pokemon has ever done. And so yeah, those are pretty much all of my thoughts about Kieran potentially being the first ever tragic villain that we could have in a mainline Pokemon game. If you guys enjoyed the video, definitely be sure to click that like button and also subscribe to the channel, as well as I'm going to be having more Pokemon videos in the future, so definitely be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on that. Comment down below and let me know what you guys think about all of this. How do you guys feel about Kieran inside of the Indigo Disk DLC? Do you guys want him to fully go villain and turn into like this first ever tragic villain inside of Pokemon, or do you have some other ideas for him? Definitely be sure to comment down below and let me know. Go follow me on Twitter at Aero so you can be featured in videos, and also join my Discord server as well. We've got a bunch of people in there who are always talking about Pokemon and Smash Bros and Nintendo, so definitely be sure to join that. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Thank you so much for watching.